Okay, I believe we're recording, and I believe this will probably be sent out to you at a later time. So again, my name is Michelle Abney-Kaler and my colleague Joni Wyndham. We were adding it up. We have 55 years of service in education between being a classroom teacher, a literacy coach, administrators, reading specialist, consultant, and now coordinators. So the biggest part of our role is to support teachers so that they can support children and school. And of course, the other role is that we want to support our families and our communities. So we value this opportunity for this relationship and to work with you. So we're going to jump right in. And while this title is supporting reluctant readers, I would like for us to start first with, what do readers do? So what do you do as a reader? I'd like for you to take a moment and read this called Peanut Butter Balls. And just take a moment, and as you're reading through it, I'd like for you to think to yourself, what do you know? What are you learning? Or what did you do as a reader? So I'm going to give you about a minute or two to read it, and then chat something you noticed in the chat box. Okay, would you take a moment and just chat something in the chat box, either what you learned from reading this, what you did as a reader, or what you noticed? So someone says the ingredient, the measurements, step by step. Any other comments? So here's what we do as a reader. Let's go here. Right here, I already notice, you see my cursor, that I have a title, right? So I'm going to learn about peanut butter balls. I also noticed that, as Myra said, that this is a recipe, and I know that from the way it's structured. Here are my ingredients, I'm reading numbers, and here are my steps. I also know that if I didn't know the word peanut, I have a picture of a peanut here that could help me. And if I'm adding graham crackers and I didn't know what graham crackers were, I have a picture here as well as peanut butter. So I bring this to your attention to notice that you don't have to read word for word to know something about reading. And this is the approach we want to take with children. So let's try those things that we just did. We said that we could tell things from not knowing necessarily every word. So take a moment and read this to yourself. Okay, well, if you're like me, you look at it and you think, I don't know what this is. I know this is not English. I know this is not Spanish because I've taken Spanish in high school and this doesn't look familiar to me. But I do know that I have quotation marks here. And so I know that there's probably a character or someone talking. I also recognize Papa and I recognize hours. Don't know what hours after the word Papa, what that exactly means. And interesting, I know all these letters, but I don't necessarily know how to put them into words. So let's see if this will help us. Picture come in. Let me click over here. Okay, now look at the picture. I have 3 bears and a young girl with golden blonde hair. Did this picture help you? If you know what this fairy tale is, would you type it in the chat box? let's help show you this. There you go, Goldilocks. All right, here it is translated for you in English. But what I did again is I took what I saw with some words and some things I knew about print and pictures, and I used all of this to help me determine what this fairy tale was. I want to go back here. And do you see this language in, this is French, by the way. This is what our kids see. Some of our kids see nothing but letters. And so our goal is to think about where they start and where we can help them move forward. So here's a quick reading in a nutshell. We won't spend a lot of time on this, but this is what reading is. The whole goal of reading is to make meaning out of print on a page. And your brain, that's what we have a brain here, does a lot of different things. These are the things that the brain is actually doing. For a minute ago, you were searching for and using information when you were looking at quotations in the French words, when you were looking for the word papa. You are also monitoring as you're reading. I don't know what this is. That's a form of monitoring. We also adjusted our reading, meaning we maybe, when we looked at the picture, it changed a little bit of our thinking, and that also helped with our inferring. So these are the actions that are going on in the brain. Some of these are noticeable and some of these are not. As educators, what our goal is through our assessment and our instruction is to try to identify these areas so that we can continue to grow them as educators. And we do that through an integrated approach using all of these. So what does that mean for you? Well, some of these things you'll be able to notice, but what you can notice is oral reading behavior. So you can usually see and or hear when kids are reading. And so here's just a few tips for you. When your child is reading to you and you notice they're not looking at words, here are a few things you could say. We want kids to be able to look at all the letters in a word and understand everything. The other thing we're thinking about is meaning. So if children are reading, but they don't seem to understand, or the word doesn't even make sense, that's meaning. And we could use some of these prompts to help our readers. And lastly, which can be difficult, is syntax, or what we call language structure. Thinking about the way the teacher or you might speak, for example. So does that sound right? Is that how we would say this? So these are some prompts you could use. So there we have just a short explanation of reading. But let's talk about what a reluctant reader. For reluctant readers, this could be ages 3 to 4, past high school. But let's talk about why kids are reluctant readers. I love this quote that my colleague just pointed out, that not all reluctant readers are bad at reading, but there could be different reasons. And so a couple of reasons that students might be reluctant is they haven't found their true interest yet. If you have a child that loves reading about cars, let them read about cars. If you like them, if they love the silly poems or the graphic books, let them start with what they're interested in. Sometimes the text is too hard. So this is, as a parent, you can buy or check out from the library books that are a bit easier so your child will feel successful at reading. Because your child wants to feel and needs to feel successful as a reader when they're at home with you. The other reason a reader might be reluctant is they haven't really mastered the skills of reading. From about ages 4 to 5 to 6 or 7, we have foundational skills, which include what you're familiar with is phonics. And so as we're trying to do this and teach this in school, some of them might be a little bit slower at mastering all these skills. The other is engagement. We all know we're competing with cell phones, videos, TV, other interests. And so really becoming engaged in the reading, which engagement goes back to, am I interested in it? Another big idea why we might have reluctant readers is identity. They might not see themselves as a reader, and this could be how they see reading modeled to them. For example, my parents didn't graduate from high school, and they didn't read to me every night, so I wasn't used to seeing another adult read. What they did do is tell me stories. So that helped to build my language. But I never had a model as someone that was a reader. So I didn't find my identity as reader until years later. And then obviously there can be and may be some learning difficulties that get in the way of reluctant readers. So just considering that if we're building on what kids already know and what they can do as a reader, and then thinking of any of these reasons that might get in their way of reading. So as we dig in today, I'm going to hand this over to Joni, and she's going to talk about the end of the year reading expectations for grade levels, letters and sounds, word work, a vocabulary comprehension, and then we'll end it with sort of a do's and don'ts and a Q&A.
All right. Okay, so we are going to look at some reading level expectations for kinder up through high school and what that looks like. And so we start here with the end of the year reading expectations for kinder. And with this, by the end of the year, we really should see kids reading some simple storylines. The books do mostly have dialogue in them. So we teach that very early. You think about, quotation marks in text. That comes in very early for our kids so that they can identify different characters talking. And so a lot of times at this grade level, we have familiar text. There are some patterns and some repetitions that we will see. But we do expect kids at this age to be able to look through what's there, what's on that page, and use their background knowledge to make some predictions about the text that is coming up. And in this, you'll also see a lot of picture support. And so that's something that we're teaching them phonics. We're teaching them to look at the words. We're teaching them to look at the pictures around them, use their background knowledge. As adult readers, we do all of those things inside of our head. And we as educators, as we're teaching, and something that you guys can do as parents is to support that. Ask them, what do you notice here? As they are reading, a lot of times this younger age, they do their thinking out loud, whereas we internalize and we do our thinking in our head, in our brain. We want to have kids think through this out loud, and we have to teach them all of the things that we know how to do. But these are things that you'll see end of the year kinder expectations. We'll move to first grade, and we are going to chunk these. We're not going to go all the way to 12th grade, but we're going to do these foundational skills are so important starting out, and we want to talk about each of these for just a little bit. But the end of the year in first grade, really the plot in our books and our texts become more elaborate, and the pictures are there, the illustrations are there to support. And we really want to make sure that, we're still supporting that out loud thinking. However, at this point in a reader's journey, they do start internalizing some. So you may not always hear your end of the year first grader reading out loud. And so that's something that's completely okay and appropriate. They do start, again, internalizing that. And then also at this level, they get into more exposure into more genres. And so they do get into nonfiction. There's a lot of animal fantasy at this level, traditional literature, and then even some simple biographies. And so if you have and you're supporting a first grader this year, just know those are some of the things that you guys will work through. At this level, the characters do go through some change. Not a lot, but we want the kids to be able to follow, but there are some changes in characters, and usually there's a lesson learned from that character. And so here's where you start seeing sentences get a little more complex, is at the end of first grade. All right, end of second grade. You can look at what that looks like there. Really more sophisticated plots, and there are fewer illustrations here. By this point, we've taught kids to visualize in their heads what they're reading and what they're hearing, and so the illustrations do become less here. And then we do start seeing some more chapter books, and so kids get really, really, really excited to read chapter books. And so just know that in that second semester of first grade and into second grade, they may start asking for more chapter books. And that's always very exciting for kids. Biographies come in second grade. Typically we'll see biographies and memoirs, again, chapter books. Fiction does have more, like I said, sophisticated plots, where you see multiple characters change over the time of the book that they're reading. And then we'll go to third grade, where we start seeing mysteries and adventures are added. Text really gets more complex in the thinking in third grade, chapter books, and also it's okay when our kids are at this age, really at any age, once they get started in a chapter book, sometimes they think they only have to read chapter books, and that's not always the case. Picture books teach great lessons. We learn great things from nonfiction text as well at this level. So it doesn't always have to be a chapter book. When I taught third grade, that's something that I really had to talk to my kids about a lot, is everyone wanted to go get the chapter book, and that's wonderful. But there are a lot of other great text and stories out there that are not chapter books. And so it's okay to encourage our kids to continue to read those picture books, because there are picture books written at high levels. And so just wanted to make sure you guys knew that as well, that it doesn't always have to be a chapter book, but we do start seeing them a lot more at this level. And really, this is where we start seeing more complex text. We get into deeper thinking. The characters really do move through and go through some significant changes in the text. The nonfiction texts are not always as familiar of topics as what they are in the lower levels. Typically in lower levels nonfiction, you'll see that topics are familiar for most kids. Third grade, it starts getting a little more difficult topics, and so that's something that you'll see as well. So when we think about fourth grade and beyond, we really start to go deeper. Our kids are reading in their head. All of this thinking is happening, and we don't always see that. And so this is really, we question and we have kids talk about, no matter if they are elementary, junior high, or high school, this is really where we want to have kids talk about what they're reading, ask some deeper level questions, because here we do see some elaborate plots in fiction, multi-dimensional characters here. There are oftentimes flashbacks, and that's something that it may be hard for a kid to keep straight. And so those are things that we want to make sure that that if our kids are reading on these levels, we're doing these things and making sure that they are understanding those things. And so that is a little bit with the foundational skills. And then what we see in reading as our kids get older and they get into the higher levels.
So let's continue on thinking about how we're going to help reluctant readers. And we're going to go over several different components, but remembering that all of these are needed for an integrated reading process and for students to learn. So if you see a gap in one area, that's where you want to work at, but continuing to support all the rest of these. So Joni's going to finish up.
So we know that we have multiple levels here, and we don't only have elementary, and that's completely fine. But as Michelle said, all of these elements build. We start at the foundation and we move up. And so I do want to talk about letters and sounds briefly, because this is where we start. And so I wanted to make sure that we gave you guys some support. If this is where your kiddos are, we wanted to make sure that we gave you some things that you could take away. Letters and sounds are so important. The English language is difficult to learn. And so in our primary grades, we really focus on making sure that our kids have this solid foundation with letters and sounds, in addition to strong reading, comprehension. And so we're going to look at both of those, but letters and sounds, I did add a video. We're not going to go into that, but I did add that. So when you guys get this slideshow, you'll have access to letters and sounds, because we want to make sure that we are saying the sounds correctly. And I'll tell you, as an adult who, if you don't do this every day, it is very difficult to make sure that you are pronouncing the sounds correctly. I am from East Texas. I have an accent. And that comes out when I teach, and it comes out when I'm making these individual sounds. And so I really, really had to learn to go back and make sure that I'm pronouncing these sounds correctly. And so if this is something that you're helping your student with in primary grades or even upper elementary, if they struggle, no matter what level they're on, we need them to pronounce sounds correctly. So the video is there for you. You guys can take a look at that. And then this alphabet linking chart is something that we use every day in our phonics curriculum, because again, it's our building blocks. This is what we go back to. And so if you have primary students, then this is something that your kids should be familiar with. We use it across the entire district. And so I've linked this in. If you click on the actual poster, that will be there for you to print just on regular paper size. But it's something that every single day you guys can do with your kids. And it's just as simple as A, apple, A, acorn, A, and then we just continue through. And you can do it in order, you can do it out of order, you can do the letters of their name, whatever it is that they need help on, whatever letters it is that they still need, that's what we want to make sure that we're supporting them on at home, is that constant practice of those, because then they take that and we build upon it in our phonics daily to start putting letters together to make words. And so those French words that we looked at earlier start making sense. And so that's something that you guys can have. I also added some things here just for you guys to play around with letters and sounds. We just want our kids engaged. We don't want them to sit down and just work on a worksheet all the time. But we do have some things that you guys can print and have at home. I put an online alphabet arc here. There's an I Spy game. We just want them talking about, looking for, identifying letters, because once we can get those letters identified and the sounds, then we're going to start identifying whole words. And all of this helps with our reading fluency. And so if this is where you are in your support at home, then these are some games and some things that you can use with your kiddos. Those are linked in for you. Again, working with words. We said once we have the letters and the sounds, we start building words. So we have word families. If I have the word at and my kid can recognize at, then I can start making more words with that, and they can start making more words with that. But from at, I can make mat, cat, hat, flat, chat. So those word families are very important. That's changing the first letter, but then we also can bring that up a level by changing the last letter. And so ham changes to has, changes to had. We can change hats to hacks. And then we can also go in and change the middle. So if you'll notice, we started with changing around that first letter, and then we jumped to the last and made some changes in the last. And then we did the changes in the middle at the very end, because that one's a little harder for our kids to do. So going in that order is important and helps them to build those skills. We just want to make sure that we are immersing them in this, in words constantly, letters and words. What do you notice? And so we have something called high frequency words. And if you'll think back to the text that I showed you earlier, in all grade levels, in all reading, in all adult reading that we do, there are words that show up more often than others. And so we want to make sure that kids can recognize those quickly. It's not necessarily words that they can't sound out. Sometimes it may be. Sometimes it's words that they can sound out, but they show up frequently in every text that they have access to. And so once we have those words, and it's as simple as looking at what book your kiddo is reading, what do you see over and over that they are struggling with, that they miss every single time? That can be a high frequency word. So we make our word, we can add visuals, whether it's magnetic letters, maybe I write it so that they can see it. We want them to be able to see that. We want to say that word to them. We want to use it in a sentence. We can have them sort our high frequency words. They can practice writing the word after we say it. They can check their spelling. Again, it's just getting that in front of them so that they can more fluently recognize that, and that helps in reading sentences. So you see, we started with letters and we moved to words, like word families, and we're going to continue this word practice so that it builds in our fluency in our sentences. And so all of this builds upon each other. I did put a high frequency word list link in for you. So that's something that these are just the most common high frequency words. Again, look at the text that your kiddo is reading. What are they missing that's showing up over and over? That can be a high frequency word. You can pull out any of those.
Okay, so well, let's talk about vocabulary. But let's think for a moment. What's the difference between words and high frequency words and vocabulary? So understanding how letters and sounds and simple words are built is what we use when we're helping kids or students actually learn how to read the words. High frequency words are also those words that they will see a lot. But vocabulary gets more to the core of deeper meaning and building language so that children have other words to use to express ideas. If you read this, the very beginning, and I'm going to read this first sentence, just exposure to words is the single most important thing you can do to help build the language pathway in your child's brain. So just speaking and having conversations with your child is one of the biggest things you can do to build vocabulary. And you can look over here at how to build your child's vocabulary. And I starred two really, really important ones that you've probably heard several times, really are the easiest things or ways you can build vocabulary. And one is having conversation with your student. Well, not your student, your child. This could be conversations in the car, conversations at home. It could be about school. It doesn't have to be about school. Of course, conversations around books are even that much better. But really having this talking with them and using language that is not dummied down, but language that will expose them to more vocabulary. And then, of course, reading together. Even if you're simply reading to them or your partner reading, taking turns, or they're reading and you're discussing. So this is what's going to build vocabulary. The more words that children are exposed to, the bigger their vocabulary will become. Sorry. All right. So again, just a few more things that you can do. Not that we would expect you to pull out the dictionary and learn vocabulary words, because that's an old school way of teaching. It's not that looking at a definition in a dictionary is wrong, but we don't identify 10 words and look up their definition in the dictionary, like some of you may have done in previous. I know that's how I was taught vocabulary. But here are all the things that kids really need to understand about how words work. They have to understand the meaning of the word. That's the whole point of vocabulary. Synonyms for the word, meaning words that are like the same word. For example, a game that I often play is called Let's Play Another Word. Or, yeah, let's say another word. And I might say, so if I have the word money, what's another word for money? And so hopefully between the child and I, we would come up with the word cash. So that's another synonym or another word for a word that they're familiar with, such as money. We might say we have food in our pantry. What's another word for food? It might be groceries. So you're just building their vocabulary by simply using, do you know another word for that? See, you have a couple other things here, the comparisons, like how are they like, how are they different, real life examples. And anytime they can even pick out a word or two from something that they're reading that's a new word to them and give them the opportunity to draw it is another way to do vocabulary as well as acting out. And finally, if you start reading to your child at a young age, on the right, oh, sorry. I apologize. If you are reading to your children daily, then they will have been exposed to at least 290,000 more words by the time they enter kindergarten. That's huge than kids who do not get read to and read with. So I also have this highlighted research has found, and there are some vocabulary activities you can do in there, but here are a couple of other things you can do as well. Like we said, read daily, play the game another word for, explain the word while reading, and a few questions you might consider asking. Do you know what that word means? Can you think of another word that means the same? Are there any words you don't understand? Asking these questions will help build their vocabulary. Vocabulary is not, it's exposing them to words and language and using them over and over. It's not necessarily writing the word and knowing how to spell it at this point. It's building kids' use of having other words to express similar ideas. Right. And then finally, let's go to comprehension. So what is it? Comprehension is basically stretching the brain. It's a reader's ability to understand the explicit, that means what the text is telling you right then and there, and the implicit meaning what you have to infer of a text or piece of writing. But I always say this, but if students can't read the text, then they can't comprehend it. So we have two big aspects to reading. One is the part with phonological awareness, phonics, letter ID, sounds, learning how to do words, to then also getting them to at an accurate end of the year reading level while continuing to build their comprehension. So reading's very difficult and very multi-layered and very complex. But here are a few things you can do when you're trying to work on comprehension. And I wouldn't suggest you work just on comprehension. Whenever you're reading together, these might be some things that you also do with your child. So one is really fun. It's just visualizing as you read. And that just means you're picturing what's happening as you're reading it. A lot of teachers refer to this as the TV's on in their head. And what do you see? So it might be as simple as you're reading a book and you're asking them, so what colors do you see in your mind when the author is describing something? Or what do you think the setting looked like? How can you describe the main character? What do you think the main character looked like? And so they can discuss it and talk about it, because that will also build vocabulary. Or they can do fun things like draw these parts of the text. That's always fun. Kids love to do that. So one thing around comprehension is if you kept a fun journal, and as they're reading, maybe they take a few minutes and just draw about what they read, their favorite part. That's also helping them to visualize. There's nothing wrong in bringing drawing into reading. Another quick way to help students is what we call read, cover, recite, check, and I just call it read, cover, check. But you simply ask a child as they're reading, and they might read, depending on the book, they might read part of a page, and you say, okay, take your hand, cover up what you read. Now turn and tell me what just happened. That's as easy as it is. And so then they continue, after they tell you, then they continue reading, and you might try it again. Okay, you just read this page, cover it up. Tell me what's happened so far. This is helping readers build the stamina with the comprehension and helping them to hold on to the meaning longer. So you could do that with just your hand and cover and you talk about it, or they could even draw it on a Post-it note or a piece of paper, or write a sentence as well. This is a really quick and easy way that you can do sort of a quick check for understanding, and helps kids build up, as I said, that stamina for holding on to comprehension as they read. And then finally, this is a really fun idea that if you haven't seen, you probably will see. It's hashtags. So after your child has read maybe a chapter or even a couple of paragraphs or a book, is to write a fun hashtag. So if you see my hashtag, it says hashtag wolves bad, hashtag bricks good, hashtags pigs just want a home. So can anybody tell me what story or fairy tale this is? And if so, could you type it in the chat box? Can you tell me what this fairy tale is based on the hashtag? Propelling on purpose, exactly, right? So it's a fun way to get kids to get to the big ideas of a text by just writing simple hashtags. And they really like this because this is the world they live in. Maybe not us, but the world they live in. So that's a couple of quick activities you can do with your child to build discussions, build comprehension. And then finally, here are some just general questions that you can ask kids while you're reading with them. Or you can have them just discuss these questions with you orally or even written response. So if you had your child could pick out their reader's notebook, they go get a binder or a notebook of some sort and decorate it. And that's the one they might keep at home for their own personal reading and things that you're doing. And in that, they could respond to some of these questions. So it doesn't have to be, you don't even have to have read the book. You can ask them, what's the trickiest part? Show me in the text. What's your favorite part? Show me in the text. But getting them to go back into the book. Is there something else you would have changed? Or let's go back to those 3 little pigs. What do you think about that wolf coming into their house? There's lots of different questions you could have because it builds the conversation and helps them think more about the text.
So I'll talk about some do's and don'ts here. And just as Michelle was talking, I have 3 teenagers. And so while I live in the primary and elementary world day to day in my job, at home, I'm definitely in teenage world. However, all of these things that Michelle had listed and things that you could do with kids to support reading and conversation and vocabulary, like I just kept thinking, I need to make sure I ask my kids that about the books they're reading because they are reading books in school. I know that they are. And so again, it's super important that we don't always have to read the book that they're reading, but we can ask questions and have conversations about this. And so no matter what grade level you are helping to support right now, these are things that can go from pre-K to 12th grade. And so I thought that was great. Do's and don'ts. So with reading at all grade levels, we want to make sure that it's fun and natural. There are some things that we can do to reward the reader. Like sometimes just having a one-on-one conversation with the adult that is supporting them, it's important to a kid, and to be able to do that over a text that they're reading, that one-on-one time may be something that they do feel rewarded through to be able to do that. Find books on their level. as educators, we're here to support and instruct students daily on text and on words and on ideas that they don't understand. That's what we've trained for. That's what we continuously are learning to do and how to do, is to help support kids with that. But at home, we just want them to read. We just want them to read because they love to read. And with reluctant readers, that's not always the case. And so finding books that are on their level or even a little lower than their level that they're working on in school is super, super important, because we want them to find that interest. We want them to find that love of reading. So let them read things that they're interested in. Let them read books that are a little easy for them. That is very helpful. Oftentimes you'll see toddlers that want to read the same books over and over again every night at bedtime. That is part of the process. That's a good thing. And we want our kids to read books over and over, because there are certain things that they get from that. The fluency practice, there's so many good things that they get from it. So if your kiddo wants to read the same book a lot, that's okay. Let them do that. It's comfortable for them. And like Michelle said earlier, they feel successful with that. And we want them to feel successful. As she mentioned, the reading journal, no matter what age or level your kiddo is on, they can draw a response or write a response. But we do want it to be low risk, and we do want them to do this often, reading and responding. As adults, we read, we respond. Whether it's a recipe that we read, there are things that we have to do from that. So we take what we read and we are doing something with it. We want our kids to do the same. Some things that we don't want to do, and I think that we fall in this trap sometimes. We have reading logs maybe that are getting sent home, things like this, but you don't have to force your kids to read daily a certain thing. There may be a day where I read to them. We do want them reading daily, but that looks different than them just sitting with a book in front of them. There are a lot of things that they can read. It might be the signs going down the road. It might be some things on, so maybe you've got social media and there are some things that they can read over your shoulder with that. Lots of things, magazines, there are so many things that we can have kids read. And